Good morning all and welcome to this e-Memoir session in association with U-explore. This morning we're going to be looking at careers guidance in the post-16 sector. We like to keep the sessions as interactive as possible, so please feel free to use a question or chat facility at any time during the session. I'll be monitoring the questions. I'll be putting them to Beej and to Andy. If there's any questions we can't answer now, we'll always come back at a later date and we're more than happy to continue the dialogue. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Beej and Andy now. Cheers now.
Thanks very much then, Marek. Good morning everyone. My name is Beej Kaczmarczyk from e-Memoir and the Learning Curve Group, and welcome to this morning's webinar, which is looking at careers guidance in the post-16 sector. We're going to be joined by Andy Pickles of U-explore. Andy, would you just like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning everybody. I'm the Chief Executive of U-explore, based in Leeds but working nationwide.
Thanks very much, Andy. And Andy will be joining us and making his presentation in the course of this webinar. As Marek says, you'll be receiving copies of all of the slides from both presenters. I think if you want the subtext to this morning is looking at the ways that you can improve the scale and scope and quality of your careers advice and guidance services in whatever kind of institution you are. I know we're being joined by quite a lot of FE colleges this morning, got some local authority people, and we've also got some independent training providers and schools. So it's a very comprehensive distribution of providers this morning. This is the second of a series that we did or have been doing with U-explore. The last one we did, which was in August, focused very much on study programs, and key themes that came out from that in terms of effective careers guidance in study programs included things like personalization, involving everyone, putting careers guidance in a national and local context, as well as making sure that information was comprehensive and that tracking and monitoring of progression was something that was built into your systems. So now we're looking at what is really, I think, some key national issues that affect it. And I would like to just say a few things about the changing context for careers guidance. In my presentation, I'll be looking at that, the government response, and what I think that means at the strategic and operational level for providers of post-16 education and training. I think there are some key things there that certainly have been highlighted over the last 2 or 3 years, which I think are important for the current state of careers guidance in the post-16 sector. Although I think what is critical here is to remind ourselves of the criticality of careers guidance that's occurred in all of the sectors, particularly from year 7 and 8 onwards in schools. I think the raising of the participation age has raised some interesting issues, not only in terms of making sure that provision was suitable for young people up to and including the age of 18, but also that we were very, very interested in what was the destinations that those young people have achieved. Some concerns about still high levels of youth unemployment, which extends up to the 23 and 24 age group, but also that for quite a lot of young people, we still don't know what their destinations are. We don't know where they are. A driver that is critical for all of us in post-16 provision is the expected growth in apprenticeships, particularly at higher levels, not necessarily at levels 2 and 3, but increasingly at higher levels. And what that means, and the challenge it means in particular, for informing young people and adults of the opportunities that apprenticeships provide, particularly when you look at some of the issues that have been raised by the Chief Inspector of Schools and what that meant in terms of the lack of a consistent or comprehensive careers guidance offer in the school sector. I think the skills plan and the Sainsbury review of technical and professional qualifications again raises issues about which pathways young people choose, academic or those technical and professional. And even there, the guidance on technical and professional between the work-based route and the sort of classroom-based route, it is critical that young people are fully informed and aware of all opportunities. A factor that I think is going to come into increasingly into careers guidance and advice will be the devolution of powers and funding to local enterprise partnerships and combined authorities. And here the criticality of local labour markets and the information and intelligence that those local and regional labour markets provide in terms of opportunities for young people as they make the decisions and choices. This is seen very much taking some kind of, if you want, significant traction through the 16 to 19 study programs, and that's something we've covered previously, an importance there of making sure that that study program delivers for that individual in a consistent way the right direction, the right path to future destinations, progression, whether it be higher education, employment, apprenticeships or further study. I think the key stage 5 performance measures accentuate this, as do the new performance measures for adult provision, which I'll look at in a minute. But I think also let's look at the increased relevance and importance of careers guidance within the new Ofsted inspection framework, which has obviously had significant impact on schools and increasingly since 2015 on the rest of us. So how has the government responded to that changing context? As you know, it's been a statutory duty of maintained schools, which includes academies and free schools, to make sure they provide careers guidance certainly from year 8 up to year 13. And that's obviously set in the context of all kinds of inconsistencies that have occurred. FE colleges have been covered by this in their funding agreements for learners up to the age of 18 and 19 to 24 with education and healthcare plans, certainly since 2012. But I think what's also interesting there is that in 2015, the quality assurance of careers guidance has been strengthened, not only through the matrix standard, but the Career Development Institute and Quality and Careers standards. What is important is to note that a whole range of agencies are now involved in the process, and you'll see that the new Job Centre Plus Employment Advisor role, which was originally aimed at 14 to 17 and is being trialled at the moment in Birmingham, is going to be fully rolled out in the next year. And I think that's very important in terms of making sure that that offer is one which is available to all people, including obviously young adults. I think the Common Subcommittee report of 2016 does raise some interesting issues. Obviously it came out of significant concerns about the quality and range and scale of careers guidance. And I think that recommended 3 key things: that there should be a separate careers guidance judgment in the Ofsted inspection, that all government-funded careers programs should be brought under the Careers and Enterprise Company remit, and that all careers guidance should be the responsibility of one minister and one department. Well, the only one of those recommendations that has been approved by government, which was last month, was the third one. So the new skills minister has a responsibility for careers guidance for all young people and adults, and that's under one minister and one department. So there's still sort of work to be done in terms of getting some of the other aspects, particularly I think a separate careers guidance judgment agreed and approved. I think the government strategy for improved careers education, which is due to be published, there is a lot of dissatisfaction. That should have been by the end of 2016. It should be linked to the skills plan and the new technical and professional routes to learning. And I think that obviously was mentioned way back in the Education White Paper of March 2016. So I think there are some sort of issues there that still need to be addressed, and obviously a concern is that that should have been announced and published. The collaboration between the National Career Service, which as you know was set up in 2012, which is all ages, and the Careers and Enterprise Company, which was set up in 2014, which is predominantly for 12 to 18-year-olds, is that they should be working more closely on things like engaging with LEPs, making sure there's a thorough understanding of the needs of young people in all of those decisions, particularly addressing issues in what we call the careers cold spots, and also making sure that the investment strategy is ensuring that confidential and impartial advice is supported by people who are qualified to do it. And those people, although mentoring and volunteering are useful support services, I think we have to make sure that there's a quality assurance in place. In terms of the sort of response that the government's making, I think you can also look at what Ofsted have said, and I'll come back to that in a few seconds. So the guidance that very much drove, for example, the work that we were doing with study programs, which came out at the same time as much of the work of the Common Subcommittee, and there's also a briefing note which I think is very important for the subcommittee, is that it is important that providers make sure that they provide access to external perspectives beyond the college or the school or the training provider, so it's independent, impartial. It gives a clear view of the labour market, and Gordon in particular, you've been looking at what that means in terms of local labour markets and the connections with other agencies. Would you like to come in at that point, Gordon?
Yeah, thanks, Beej, and good morning, everybody. Yeah, it was just to say really that having been a director of learner services or student services for many years, now retired, but keen observer of what's going on, one of the things that seems to be reappearing is the need for much more local collaboration and sharing of information, particularly at learning partnership level, with the agencies and with all the providers to get consistency and relevance and recency of information shared and discussed. And that's an issue perhaps we can go back to later on, Beej, because I think that's something that keeps coming back to practitioners, is about that need to share information and collaborate more operationally as well as strategically.
Yeah, I think that's critical. You see that the guidance also said that not to ignore the importance of working with your local authorities as well as the LEPs, with the National Career Service, with the Careers and Enterprise Company. But I think a key message, and certainly it's a message that has been extended recently to the Careers and Enterprise Company, is the need to focus on those learners who are disadvantaged, either through economic reasons or through intrinsic needs, in particular to raise the aspirations of students with special education needs and or disabilities. So I think there's a focus there. You can see that that's a strength of view, a clear sense of direction that I think increasingly we as providers have to respond to. So what are the expectations? Particularly around study programs, the expectation was this, and I just want to remind you, because obviously a lot of this relates to the 16 to 18 group and then the extended 19 to 24 age group with education, healthcare plans, etc., is that all providers of 16 to 19 education and training should develop well-designed individual study programs that offer 16 to 19 learners progression to a higher level of study than a prior attainment to meet clear educational and career aspirations. And I think that's absolutely critical. And when you relate that to what LEPs are starting to do in terms of defining what those economic needs are, they're also focusing on what the educational needs are, and I think that's very important. But you can see that manifesting itself in some of the reports that have come out recently. I think the other key implications that come out of this, particularly from our experience of study programs over the last 3 years, is how difficult it is to do some things, in particular the matching of the supply and demand for labour. I know Andy's going to talk a lot about the local labour market and labour market intelligence. But in some parts of the country, schools and colleges are overwhelmed by offers from employers, and other places it's the other way around. So how do we get that consistency? And what kind of things can we do, not only in terms of careers advice and guidance, but in more general, that education around the world of work? For example, how relevant is the type of work placement or work experience or traineeships that you're offering young people? And I think, therefore, a key aspect of this is developing much better engagement with employers. And I know Andy will talk about that. It's how do you make sure that the link between education and the world of work is improved, and how do we mutually understand the needs of each other, the needs of schools and colleges and training providers, and at the same time the needs of employers and the ways in which they work. But what is critical, as Gordon says, is we share experience of what does work and what is effective. And that's what U-explore will be doing with us later on. I think the key Stage 5 performance measures, which are being applied obviously from this year, that starts to come very much into people's minds and into the front of their planning and strategic decisions. Not only in terms of progress, attainment, retention, progress in English and Maths, which of course is critical for access to the labour market, but also destinations. And that, I think, is one area that particularly the outgoing Chief Inspector, Wilshaw, made some quite interesting comments this year. He described careers education as disaster, especially in respect of the advice in schools about apprenticeships. And here he stressed the importance of good quality destination data and how important that would be in terms of showing progression, not only into further education and training, but also into employment, and especially employment that is employment that has training attached to it. For adults, of course, from this year, we also have performance management of outcomes, not only in terms of achievements, but look at those three others, destinations in terms of employment, etc., further education, higher education, but also how people are progressing in learning, for example, acquiring skills at higher levels, skills that are relevant to the labour market, English and maths, again, which will often remove the barrier to access to the labour market, but also in future earnings. So you can see a significant emphasis here on outcomes, and clearly that starts to relate back to the impacts of what you're doing in your education and training programs, including the careers guidance that you're offering. So it is not an add-on, it's embedded into whatever programs you're offering. You see that really accentuated with the Common Inspection Framework applied from last year, and you can see in there that a number of descriptors include relevance, which are included, are relevant to careers under effectiveness of leadership and management, quality of teaching, learning, assessment, outcomes for learners as you'd expect, but also in the new judgment on personal development, behaviour and welfare of learners. And this extends then to looking at the different types of programs that young people and adults will undertake, such as your 16 to 19 programs, which I've focused on already, but also think about adult learning programs, so classroom-based, apprenticeships, traineeships, as well as high-needs learners. And also, I would not ignore, there is also, for those of you who are offering significant programs for 14 to 16-year-olds, to again relate those descriptors to that type of program as well. But under personal development, behaviour and welfare, you can see quite significant emphasis is putting on how well you're preparing people for their next steps, right? Whether that be further study or jobs with training, apprenticeships, and a key emphasis on how well learners understand their career options and are prepared for the next steps. And that includes, you know, the engagement with a whole lot of people in different contexts, such as peers, trainees, and I would certainly include employers there, and things like examples of work placements as active citizens. And you can see that even in the guidance for what is a grade 1, an outstanding provider, you can see it quite clearly stated there. The outstanding providers provide high quality, impartial careers guidance that helps students to make informed choices about which courses suit their academic needs and aspirations. They're then prepared for the next stage of education, employment, self-employment, which of course we sometimes ignore, but I think increasingly portfolio working and self-employment will become an important aspect of young people and adults' future careers and jobs, or other forms of training. So you can see that there's a significant emphasis being placed. And just to show you that different providers respond in different ways. But one thing that's a thread through what we did in the previous webinar, and also Andy will be talking about, is how important the labour market is. And how important local labour market intelligence is. An example here from Bishop Auckland College that made sure that study programs took account of it, and in making sure that those young people through their study programs would then be able to contribute to economic prosperity in the area, whatever though that range of options and opportunities was. So Andy's going to pick up on some of these key issues, but I think what came out from all of this sort of contextual stuff was, you know, how independent, impartial and up-to-date is the information that you're providing to young adults, how effectively are all the key partners involved, is careers guidance embedded across the curriculum, and Andy will pick up on these questions. I've already talked about the effectiveness of your labour engagement and use of local labour market intelligence, but also how well do you track and record everything in terms of impact and the contribution it makes. So before I hand over to Andy, then a couple of things that I think are becoming a bit clearer from the current state of careers guidance, and this is not only in the Ofsted thematic review, but in the work of the Common Subcommittee. And there's been a lot of literature around in the last 2 years about the state of careers guidance in not only in the post-16 sector, but also in the school sector up to Key Stage 4, is that the access to high quality careers provision whether it be careers education, guidance and advice is inconsistent. Interests of providers and learners are not always aligned, particularly where sometimes decisions are made that don't allow learners full access to all the information about, for example, opportunities at post-16. Providers, employers, learners and parents still need support to navigate the existing systems, and that's something Andy's going to focus on in terms of the U-explore approach to this support and navigation of the complexity around careers advice and guidance. Not all partners are fully engaged, and it's because partly those partners themselves are not fully developed, such as LEX. How do we all relate this to higher education? I think it's a key issue. But there are other aspects. The Chamber of Commerce report talked about the mismatch between education leaders and business people when it comes to careers guidance. We use different language, we have different expectations. And City and Guilds report talked about the low prestige for careers advice amongst young people when it questioned them. However, there are some good examples of very good practice in careers education, and particularly the Gatsby Foundation, which is benchmarked against best practice in other countries. And you can see that even in the intentions and determinations of different agencies to try and build on the Gatsby recommendation, the Gatsby, if you want, criteria for effective careers guidance. And you can see here, for example, the ambition of the London Enterprise Panel working with the councils and obviously supported by the Mayor of London. And you can see that there's an intention there to create what I think we want to see as a good quality careers advice and guidance system. A long way to go, I think, in most cases. So at that point, I would like to say if there's any other comments, any questions at this point. Would you like to add anything, Andy, before we move on, or Gordon?
No, I think you've covered it for me, Beej.
Yeah, I'll pick up on a few of the points you've made there, Beej. It leads quite nicely into what I'll cover.
Okay, so if I now hand over to Andy, you just tell me when you want me to move the slides on, yeah? That might be easiest.
Thank you. You're a fine assistant, Beej.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. As mentioned, I am the Chief Exec and Founder of U-explore. I just want to give you a little bit of background about what we do, where we've come from, and importantly what we're doing now, and offer you some insights and practical solutions to answer some of those questions and issues that Beej has raised. The key thing for us, I think, is that it's a very fragmented market with regards to information that's out there for young people, schools and colleges. So a big part of our strategy was to bring it all together, consolidate, and just create a bit of scale across the sector so that we could start getting some useful information from schools and colleges to help with things like employer engagement. What you're seeing on the screen there are some of our key assets. We recently acquired a company called Plotter, which some of you may be familiar with, which was providing careers information, advice and guidance for young people, and had a very strong engagement with employers. A product which I'll showcase to you in a second just via some screenshots is startprofile.com, which is our leading career software now, which is free to all schools and colleges. We've provided U-explore Online for a number of years, which is a broader work-related learning tool to schools and colleges, and we've launched a campaign called 3-Minute Hero, which is trying to fight fire with respect to a lot of influence is now coming from YouTube and vloggers, and so we see from our stats that we are creating a nation of makeup artists because lots of young people are being influenced by what they see on YouTube. And there's a young lady on there called Nikki with a channel she calls Tutorials, which has 34 million views of her applying makeup. So information is quite key for us. So 3-Minute Hero is about creating short 3-minute stories from real people, user-generated content. So I'll just walk you through them. If you could just change the slide, Beej, our approach to the market in the first instance. As mentioned, the key thing for us setting out in this last year was to build scale. Whilst lots of schools and colleges are using lots of different bits of software, it doesn't really help in supporting the engagement with employers and indeed providers. So whilst for many years we've provided software as a service to schools and colleges, budgets are falling through the floor, the prospect of schools and colleges paying for career software started falling through the floor equally. So we launched a product in January of this year called Start Profile, which was comprehensive and impartial, which I'll touch on in a moment. But the objective was, if we can build scale, we can start doing some of that collaboration Beej was talking about earlier. If a lot of schools in your catchment area are on the same software, the ability to help you engage with them and showcase your provision becomes a reality, and the ability to start pulling out meaningful information around aspiration becomes a reality as well. So we launched that in January, and we already have 1,500 schools and colleges registered to use the system. Our approach was very much going through schools and colleges rather than creating a website we hoped young people would go to. I have two teenagers myself, 13 and 15, and they don't gravitate towards careers guidance sites in their own time. So the strategy was very much, let's drive this through the education sector, and let's focus on outcomes for colleges and indeed schools. So the system that's made available, as we'll see in a second, covers all pathways, all providers, all jobs. But importantly, it's linked to those outcomes that yourself in FE or indeed in the school space are needing to deliver to evidence to Ofsted or deliver your statutory duty. So we provide a whole lot of resource to deliver those outcomes. If we're driving outcomes, we're getting the engagement of young people and we're getting that valuable information. I'll talk a lot about data, and you'll see on the next slide, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So we find there's a lot of information out there for young people, but it's the so what factor. So what was the result of young people engaging with that information? Has it changed their thinking? So underpinning a lot of the work that we do is data. That's why every young person is registered to the school or the college, to the system, so we know who they are, where they are, and what their interests are. If we build that scale, it can help us with partnerships then. So even now, the scale that we've built throughout this year, we're now having really good conversations with local enterprise partnerships. We're working with local authorities. We're starting to work with the CBI. We're talking to the careers and enterprise companies. So our job was to bring together this picture of scale, which could then help third parties start working with us to add more value to the system. And let's not reinvent the wheel. There is so much great content out there. It's a point of aggregation. So we're very much about connecting to those data feeds that exist from places like the National Apprenticeship Service, so we can keep everything in one place. And our vision down there at the bottom was to create a universally accessible technology which could transform careers guidance. So that was our approach, and with the Plotter acquisition now, that's given us a reach into over 3,000 secondary schools and colleges. So if you could just move on for me, Beej. We call it a careers ecosystem because if you do build that scale, and we have got a well-informed young person, the whole thing starts to turn. When I started talking to FE providers in January of this year about our intent, naturally the feedback was, come back and talk to us when you have a story to tell, as in you've got a lot of schools in my area using that system. We returned to those colleges in June, July, August, September of this year when we've got 70% penetration in key areas. Then there is interest for those providers to start adding additional content and value to the system. Talking to HS2 last week, huge opportunities that they can present now for schools, colleges and young people, but the thing that attracts them is route to market. Getting into 6,000 schools is a very difficult ask for an employer, so by building that infrastructure we're now in a position where we can support a lot of different stakeholders all contributing to the same thing, which is making sure young people have access to the right information, and then we're acting on the information that's coming out of the system. So we talk about a career ecosystem because the whole thing will start to turn if we build scale. Thanks, Beej. Just picking up then on some of what Beej has said, and this is coming back from our experiences in talking to our network. These are some of the key maybe considerations for you. These are some of the questions that are being asked of our network. Quite often there's a lot of great stuff happening in schools and colleges with regards to careers guidance, but it's not hung together very well, and you're not able in a lot of senses to measure the impact of your careers guidance program. So you may have had a fantastic employer engagement day, you may have had a careers event, what was the impact other than young people enjoyed it? Did it change thinking? Where was the value? So that's a key question that we ask our partners now about how you're measuring the impact of what you do. Independent, impartial and up to date, that's back to this point of aggregation. So we want to help you by making sure that the system you're using is dynamic, as in it's pulling live information in, live labour market information. So the question that you're asking yourselves there, can you comfortably evidence that not only is our provision available to our young people, but also are we showing them the opportunities that surround us as well? Employer engagement, I got into the careers sector many years ago by being the employer talking to young people in schools, but I found it was far more effective employer engagement if some work was done in the first instance to identify those young people that wanted to talk about my particular sector, and maybe they could ask some questions. So by doing good careers exploration and identifying what young people are interested in, that gives you something to go and talk to your partner employers to say, I have 25 young people who'd like to talk to you about being developers, architects, chefs, whatever that may be. So it's just thinking how you use that data to do better employer engagement. A key driver, as we know, is parental involvement, and we support our schools and colleges with resources to engage parents, and because the system is free, it's a really easy win to be communicating with parents, say this is free, it's here for you to help your children make the right decisions. We're seeing quite often that careers is a little bit disparate across the school or the college. So we're talking about study program in post-16. I was talking to a school the other day about BTEC and the changes to how BTECs are now being measured. You have to evidence how you're embedding careers guidance and employer engagement into those subject areas. So again, lots of resources available to do that. LMI is the biggie for me ultimately. If you don't bring labour market information into careers guidance, it becomes a bit of a cul-de-sac for young people. We may be sending them down blind alleys. We're doing a lot of work right now to improve how we communicate labour market information into the sector. Working with local enterprise partnerships, it's important that we don't just show the jobs of today, but we can evidence that we're showing the jobs for the next 3, 5 and 10 years time. So a question just for you guys to ask yourselves, and how are you measuring the impact of activities? A lot of work being done by the Careers Enterprise company now with their enterprise advisors. I asked one of the local LEPs recently, how are you measuring the impact of the activities that you're doing? And they said, we just ring schools. Whereas if you are using the right technology, you're recording the right data, if something happens within that school and activity, was it an upturn in the amount of young people interested in apprenticeships or in engineering? So just thinking about the fact that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. But there are some of the key things that are coming out now from our experiences of talking to schools and colleges. Okay, Beej, thanks.
Just before you move on, Andy, there's a question from Chris, who says that should it just be about local labour market intelligence? What about at the regional and national level? Because obviously for a lot of young people, they will be quite mobile.
I think that's a really good point, and I was working in Cumbria very recently, and then I was down in Essex the other day, and this very same question was raised. So whilst there is a challenge about retaining workforce, the reality is in certain areas young people need to be able to see beyond the boundaries of where they live, and so through Start Profile you can zoom out and you can look at apprenticeship opportunities and work opportunities wherever your interests may lie. So absolutely right, Chris. Whilst we want to show what are the economic priorities in your area, naturally young people will want to travel as well. So yeah, you have to be able to tackle that question. What we just flicked onto there is the homepage of Start Profile. This product is built around a very simple principle of 3 pillars. Pillar 1 is, who am I? Self-awareness is a very big thing. Can you evidence the personalization of your offer? And so number 1 for us was enabling the young person to profile themselves. Number 2 was what's out there, career exploration, and then number 3 was how do I get there, pathways and providers. So you can see the 4 boxes along the top there cover those key aspects. You can dive in and you can search the product as well. You'll see from what's written below the picture of my son there with his big fringe, he'll kill me for that, is the system is comprehensive. So you have 1,400 job profiles on there. There are 200,000 courses, which I'll come on to in a moment. There are just short of 7,000 providers and 25,000 live vacancies. The second point is independent and impartial, and also it's free, which is obviously a great thing at this particular time. And as you can see there, just short of 1,400 schools and colleges registered to use the system. So I'm going to send out, hopefully there's going to be access to links so you can go and explore the site for yourselves, but I'm just going to flick through a couple of screenshots to offer you a bit of a context. Thanks, Beej, if you want to click on. The point of personalisation, lots of schools and colleges need to support young people with a starting point. Systems have been used for many years, and I think some of you may reflect back on your own careers guidance where you had to answer 200 questions and the computer delivered a particular job that was right for you, which maybe sometimes be disappointing. What we do here, we enable the student to personalise the journey by looking at their skills, their interests, their work preferences and their qualities. We enable them to rate how they feel about those things, and then they can hit the jobs that suit me button, as you'll see in the top right hand corner there. Now there are 1,400 job profiles from the graphic designer to the doctor, to the astronaut. Everything's in there, and so what a student can do, they can just rate the kind of things that interest them as a starting point, and then we'll recommend the jobs that suit them. Now what we do is some labour market weighting there, so there are certain jobs that you might not want to see popping up just because the algorithm matched it to you. That might be a clockmaker or a puppeteer, which are fantastic jobs. If you want to find them, you can search them, but what we do is we think about labour market relevance in the results that come back. So Jack here would do his profile, and he would hit that the jobs that suit me button. Now this is giving Jack a baseline of ideas, and the objective is, if we just click on Beej, so he's got some job suggestions coming back. Now he's clicked through to multimedia developer, which was one of his recommendations. The objective there is for Jack to rate this job. So from a career exploration point of view, all the information is here. You'll see in the box in the middle 20 apprenticeships near you, 1 live job vacancy near you. So that information is pulled in by the National Apprenticeship Services API, and then we also pull in from Indeed's API, which pulls job vacancies in from Universal Job Match, Monster and a number of other sources. I think that's quite a powerful thing to do because it gives young people a temperature of the jobs in their area, but also if you are wanting to enter that labour market or apply for an apprenticeship, we pull it in real time. So it picks up that Jack's at Leeds City College and it's showing him what's available. The critical thing in using the system is encouraging students to rate their jobs, because that gives you the data to support your employer engagement, and also just look at the progression of aspiration. So when this learner started with me in year 12, they had this idea, and it's progressed to a meaningful occupation that's in line with their skills and their qualifications. You can see the labour market information coming in there from UKCES. So salary information. If we clicked on availability, I'm not going to show you everything today, it'll show you the trends of those jobs as well. So if you wanted to embed careers guidance in study program, you can direct learners to the job profiles where they can find out a huge amount of information about the jobs. We can't fully see on this screenshot, but there's over 1,000 videos of people doing the jobs that young people are aspiring to do. So that's your career exploration piece, and as we see there, it's pulling in 25,000 live vacancies from live data feeds. Thanks, Beej.
And another question just from Chris before you move on. He's just asked, can the labour market intelligence weighting be turned on and off?
This is where the partnership work is critical. So we're just about to start working with the North East local enterprise partnership. They approached us because we're building a reasonable scale in the Northeast. What I'm saying is all I can do at the moment is work with what's available from a data feed perspective. Now what I want to be able to do working with local partners is to be able to identify critical jobs in key areas. So if I'm working with the Northeast LEP, it's just database driven. We know those learners are looking at the system in the Northeast, and so their view should be very different to the view of somebody looking in the Southwest. So yes, indeed, we can vary how that labour market information is being presented, but that's why the collaboration is important for us, to be able to say to the LEP, look, there is a route to working with your schools and colleges here, help us get the labour market information right down to that granular level. So yes is the answer, Chris.
Yeah. That's great, thanks very much, and thank you.
So we've looked at the personalization, we've looked, which helps with the who am I piece, we've looked at what's out there, which is career exploration. So if Jack's interested in being a software developer, because we know where Jack is, we'll show him all the pathways. So he could choose an advanced apprenticeship, he could choose an A-level. If he wants to do an A-level in computer programming, we know where he is, so we can then show him the local providers with the provision. So we can see here, he's on the screen split here, so on the one hand you can look at apprenticeship vacancies near him that are matched to his interest. On the other side of the screen you'll see their Leeds City College. Now as FE providers you're all featured on Start Profile. We pull your information in from Edubase and we pull it in from Unistats. If your provision's on the SFA's National Course Directory, we will pull that content through. So everybody's featured on the system. So that's helping schools show every pathway and every provider in their area. Then equally for yourselves in FE, you can also show provision moving into post-18. I think there's a thing here for you in the FE sector to also think about how this system can help you with your outreach going back into schools. So our starting point was we knew and not many FE providers would show any interest in working with us a year ago when we were just starting, but now our scale is building and you're on our map. If we just flick onto the next slide there, Beej, there is the opportunity to personalize that. So Preston College are now working directly with us. We find with the SFA data that there's sometimes wrinkles in the data that's coming through the way things have been inputted. And so the opportunity is there now for you as providers to just have a direct relationship with us and become a verified provider. So what Preston College decided to do was to verify their course information with us and provide it directly so we can optimize it against all the jobs and all the pathways. If you just flick again for me, Beej, what they've also done then, so I would click on find out more about Preston College. It showed me that they are delivering the particular course I'm interested in. So they've added their logo, they've added their social media links, and you can see they've got the verified provider status. So there's an opportunity for you to consider there as a provider should you wish to just optimize how you're found on the system and also how your course information is presented to your own learners as well. So this is how we're presenting providers from an FE and HE perspective. Now it's one thing to have an information-led site out there, it's another thing to drive the usage. So we provide a huge amount of resource covering Key Stage 3, 4 and 5, going back to what I mentioned earlier, who am I, what's out there, how do I get there? So lots of lesson plans, nice tutorial lessons as well that can be used in a nice bite-sized way. So we're really focused on helping schools deliver on outcomes which drives the data that can support the engagement with employers and evidence what you're doing. So a lot of resource, again it's all free to be able to download to just drive those outcomes. Thanks, Beej. So that's the Start Profile side of things, which is the comprehensive, independent and impartial resource. That will always be free and always be updated and always be dynamic. We've got more functionality that we're adding to it in this next calendar year. Sat behind that, we have a system called Track, which is the data management and reporting. There is a free version of this available to all schools and colleges who use Start Profile, where you can manage the information of your students, forgotten passwords and such like, and you can download the teaching resource. But you could also upgrade to this system that enables you to more effectively manage what's happening on Start. So this is the home page of that, where you can access student aspiration files, manage how staff are using the system, and there's a whole bunch of reports here. So if we just click on Beej. So the starting point is that through the system you can interrogate the data any which way. So that can be via student, cohort, year group or the entire college, or anybody that's using the system that's registered to your college or training provider. When you come on board with ourselves at U-explore, we give you a registration code for your students and for your staff. So they are locked to the system and locked to your college. So anything they're doing is then the data's pulling into the back-end system. So this screenshot here is showing you how you can evidence and improve destinations, employer engagement and curriculum planning. So I could look at those filters and say, show me qualifications by a subject. It's maybe looking across all year groups, or it's maybe just looking at year 12. So we get a picture there of who's interested in BTEC National, A-levels in Geography, maybe that is post-18. So you're getting an idea here. You can see who's chosen it, who's considering, or maybe just thinking about it. I can click into there and find out who those students are. So there's a nice starting point to start seeing what is the impact of START on our students. Well, we've now got an uplift of interest in young people liking an apprenticeship or choosing a particular career aspiration. If you want to just click through, Beej. You could also on that last page look at intended destinations. So that is from a schools coming into you. What Preston College are doing with us now is using START to support their outreach work. Accrington and Rosendale College doing the same thing. Because they know a lot of the schools in their area are using START, they're using START to engage young people and also communicate their provision. Schools then are encouraging students to identify what are their intended destinations. We can work with colleges and training providers to communicate which young people are identifying the college as a potential interest. So you can see where the destination measures come in. Now we're looking at Jack's aspiration file here. So everything that Jack does on the START system is then pulled into track. So we can see that Jack's identified multimedia programmer as his favourite job. If we were live, we would click on his aspiration report and see what else Jack's like and see if there's any consistency there. Because we're pulling in labour market information, we're showing him how available that job is in his local labour market, and we're showing you how suitable he is for that job. So he's done his profile, the LMI is being pulled in, so the important factor for Jack here is I'm suitable for this job, and I can see the strong availability in the labour market. So I'm kind of making the right choice here. On the personalisation piece we looked at before, Jack's done his skills profile. We can see he's rated analysing, numeracy and computer skills as excellent, but he's identifying designing and delegation as weak skills, so something we can maybe support Jack with. Down the bottom there, his education choices, he's looking at South Leeds Academy and Leeds College of Building, and he's identified A-level in graphic design and a couple of apprenticeships there as well. So the data is there to help you inform and support guidance. If I'm a guidance professional, I know what Jack's interests are. It just helps me with that guidance session with him. But also when you look across the data across your year group, you can identify those students most in need. So if resources tight from a face-to-face point of view, you can identify those students that are maybe most in need of face-to-face guidance. Okay, Beej? Nearly done. The aspiration report is the thing that I find most powerful. So that is pulling all the interests of young people across your establishment. Now clearly there are hundreds of, well, it's 140 jobs here. This is showing you the top 15. You can see number 3 there, the makeup artist is very prominent right now. Now I use this quite often when I'm doing outreach in schools to say, fantastic, a lot of you are aspiring to be footballers and makeup artists. Let's think about the labour market in our area. If you were walking into work today with your aspirations, how many of you do you think would be successful in becoming makeup artists? We don't need 162 of them in this particular area. But if you at least you know this, you can manage it and we can start moving that aspiration and talking about associated skills. So the aspiration report just enables you to monitor from a student perspective or across the college, what does aspiration look like? And this is where, for me, it really helps with that employer engagement where I can say, I've got a strong interest in computer games design. Let's go and talk to the sector. Thanks, Beej.
Thank you.
And so finally, so I've just whisked you through, obviously I didn't want to do a product demo because it's not the time to do so, and technology on this kind of thing is not always as reliable, but here's the opportunity should you wish to follow up and hopefully what I've discussed with you is of interest. You can register to START for your college, your training provider, your school, your local authority. It's free of charge, so just drop me a note, get in touch with the office. We just need your exam centre number to set you up a registration code, and we'll give you all the information to get you up and running. We'd encourage you to book an online session so we can do a webinar like this for staff, and we'll talk you through the key functionality on a live demo so you're good to go. If you're interested in using the data, let us know. We'll activate that for you for a couple of months so you can get a feel for the data. And if you did want to optimize your profile and make sure that you're represented well in the schools in your area, then please again get in touch and we can work with you to optimize that profile. I think that's me, Beej.
Thanks very much, Tim. Thank you, Andy. That was a very comprehensive view of the different ways in which U-explore can support us as providers. And before we move on, just to sort of conclude, you've had an opportunity to, I suppose, consider the context for careers guidance, the national picture, the sort of issues that raised, and how important it is to have an organisational response to that, not only in terms of study programmes, but what about all the other provision you make, and particularly for adults, and what about those apprentices that might want to review their prospects and change their direction. And also, I think Andy's given us a very good example of how U-explore can facilitate and improve the quality of your careers guidance, and I think place careers education right at the very heart of your operation. Are there any sort of other questions? We've had one or two comments that have been very supportive. Please take advantage in terms of the opportunities that Andy's just shared with you. So there's his contact details and his mobile number there. Please take up this opportunity. We really do advise you to look at it, particularly if you haven't looked at it already. Are there any questions or comments? Gordon, would you like to come in at this point?
Yeah, thanks to you both for a very, very comprehensive coverage of a key issue. And one of the things that I've been working with Beej for many years now on CPD front, and very much gearing towards get a whole institution approach to issues. It's just not about the career service or learner services within the college. It's about every member of staff being aware of this type of development, and that's something perhaps Andy can comment about, is whether you're finding inroads into that approach. There's a whole college approach as opposed to just being one segment of the college.
Yeah, I think it's key. Quite often we find it's quite a transient situation with regards to the responsibility of careers guidance. So I think it's important that it's communicated across the college. There is succession planning in there as part of your careers guidance strategy and plan, so that it becomes the fabric of what you do. I think technology has a really key role in underpinning, so that, as we said, we can manage that. But I think if we can get as many members of staff involved as possible, then careers guidance starts happening as the sort of fabric and as via osmosis, if you want, through subject areas as well as through student services. And getting senior leadership buy-in is absolutely critical, that we've found.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks for that, Andy. A good comment from Chris, a supportive comment. Thanks, Chris. His comment is, it gives me new ideas for practice, seeing technology as a support for independent information, advice and guidance, not a threat. So I think that's critical, isn't it?
It is.
And I mean, I think for me, the four themes that come out from, and I think this is always, I go back to maybe, along with Gordon, to years and years back when we were introducing careers guidance and advice into the college sector. The four themes always came through, and that was the suitability and availability of information and tools for young people and those people that support them. I think, Andy, you've emphasised this has got to be something that young people and young adults are comfortable using. That's the key thing.
Well, absolutely. And the critical thing for me, whilst this is maybe not relevant from a FE perspective with your learners today, our message is to start as early as we can, right back into year 7, 8 and 9, because the objective is to get a more informed young person at that year 11 gateway, so you get the right young person on the right course with the right provider. I think there's outreach support that colleges do within schools, but the critical thing is we want young people adopting this technology through their schools and just starting to waken their ideas up a little bit earlier on. And the system is also cross-platform, so be that handheld devices, iPads, I think that's a critical factor as well.
I think that's the second thing I just want to conclude with. A key theme for me is successful transition. I think in England we seem to have these cliff edges, don't we? There's a cliff edge when you make your options choices, before you go into GCSEs. There's a cliff edge at 16, there's another cliff edge at 18. And I think what we've really got to make sure is that those are not seen as cliff edges, they're seen as transitions which young people navigate successfully, and that means they've got to be well informed. So that for me is the second thing. The third thing is, and this is where the technology I think is critical, is that we've got to support the navigation, not only for the young person, but also their advocates, their guardians, their parents, So it's not just that online, it's available face-to-face or through a blended route. So I think that's where the technology comes in. But for me, the fourth sort of, if you want, theme, so suitability and availability, the first, successful transition is the second, supported navigation is the third. The fourth one is consistency, and in some cases I think compliance. You know, as Andy said, these are statutory duties on us as providers. But let's look at it not as we have to comply, it's about how this empowers, engages and improves. So having clear outcomes and clear expectations of everyone that's involved in careers guidance, that's everyone, that's all teachers, all support staff, and to make sure that that is a consistent approach and that we've got clear measures of impact so that it's engagement of all, including the young people, but I think also making sure that we know how well that engagement has been, how successful it's been. So we've got impact measures and outcomes. So those are the four things I think that that certainly the focus of today was about. Any other comments then, just before we finish off? I think we've got at least a few people here that have already indicated interest in picking up on START, Andy. So I'll make sure that all those names get to you as well. Well, thanks very much then,
Great.
Andy. Thanks very much for your contribution today. Very, very good contribution. Thanks for all the questions. Again, a good range of questions. Thanks to Gordon as well for your contributions. And thanks to Marek for looking after all of the technical and monitoring and moderating side of it. Again, excellent questions. We've got to thank you for being very active listeners. We really appreciate it. Thanks very much then. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Beej.
Super. Thank you. I'm just going to stop the recording now.